Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 157 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. Dag and I talked for another hour plus about this week's Secret Invasion episode, even though the show itself was only 37 minutes, including credits. In fact, the episode length is where we began our discussion, so let's go ahead and get started there. Can you believe how short this was?
I did not look at the runtime before just pushing play and enjoying it. And when it ended, I was like, that's it? How long was, oh my gosh, it's shorter than the last episode.
Yeah.
But I understand why this episode is silent. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fast-paced episode. So it makes sense for it to be this short, comparatively speaking. I just wonder if by episode 6 we're going to be like, all right, previously on, and the end.
Oh, but now we have a whole different kind of like thinking about who is and isn't going to make it through the season.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started in on that, shall we? The episode titled Beloved. And I did not see this coming. I feel like I should have after it happened, but I was totally suckered in and did not see Gaia's extremis resurrection happening here.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that was quick.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much like the Saturday morning serials. Oh, how's our hero going to get out of this? Oh, they're out. They got out. The cliffhanger is over.
She knew what she was going up against, and she knew what might happen.
That is absolutely true. Now, I noticed, because I paused on the computer screen when we should get this little flashback of her taking Dalton's memories and then heading to the Super Skrull machine. So Extremis was in the front of the screen as active, but I noticed that there were tabs for Cull Obsidian and the Frost Beast in that same window. So I wonder if that's not the only ability she gave herself when she put herself into the chamber.
I am certain we will find out by the end of the season.
I am absolutely certain of that as well. But that's just a quick little scene at the front. I'm kind of surprised that they didn't tease that out a little longer and, start the episode with the next scene, which is Paris 2012.
Yeah, shortly after the Battle of New York, Nick Fury shows up at what appears to be a nicely scaled bar in Paris.
Yeah, bar, restaurant, definitely upper middle class or better.
Yeah.
And Fury meets up with Vara / Priscilla. We finally get an explanation for Scylla in the last episode.
Perfect.
She is Dr. Priscilla Davis, as we'll find out in full later. And again, the chemistry between these two actors is un fuego.
Yeah, it is. I really enjoyed it. It's, I was thinking back on all of Sam Jackson's performances and all the ones I've seen. Let's limit that down. And I'm just assuming that I have a bias because I've never really seen him portray a character involved in a healthy relationship. And we can question health as we get a little bit later
Yeah.
into the episode, but it's definitely wholesome.
Yeah, especially in these flashback scenes we get. Last episode we got their kind of meet cute with her in the new face, and now we get this post Avengers battle, just telling each other basically how much they love each other and how much they love being loved.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really love about this is a lot of the dialogue that Priscilla is saying here, it resonates with some of the things that Nick Fury was saying in Avengers. We are helplessly outclassed. He's got an inside track. He knows a little bit more about what's going on in Avengers now. It adds a little more context to why he's like, we need to fend off this alien invasion. And she says, home is worth fighting for, which is something they both would resonate with.
You're right. It does put his knowledge and the whole idea of putting together this team, the fact that he knows Skrulls are on Earth, he knows other alien cultures exist. It makes much more sense for him to want to put together the Avengers and be ready for when that invasion inevitably occurs.
100%. I've been trying to rewatch earlier Marvel movies with these episodes in mind, and just sort of gleaning a bit more meaning in things there.
Although at the same time, there's a lot of movies and such where you're like, okay, why didn't he call in any of his Skrull friends then?
Yeah, that could have been nice.
How did none of the Skrulls tell him about Hydra? All that sort of stuff.
I was wondering how many Skrulls possessed the lives of the blipped after the snap.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I watched Endgame today because we just installed our big O TV and our speakers into the ceiling.
Nice.
And so yeah, it's been really cool. So yeah, I got to see this on it. It's pretty cool.
Very cool. 2 of the watches I do are on an iPad, and then the one that I do right before we get on and have our conversation is on my actual TV. Because one of the things I loved doing in these shows, and it's something that we haven't seen in this show at all, is the QR code watch.
Oh, where there's like a QR code hidden in the background of a scene somewhere.
Exactly. And if you
Gotcha.
scan that QR code, it gives you a free comic that you can read. Almost always related to the subject of the show. And it surprised me that we have not had that in Secret Invasion. It seems like secrets and finding codes and all that sort of thing would be the ideal show for that sort of augmented reality game, as they sometimes call these things.
You're absolutely right. For a show that purports to be in the genre, they're really missing out. I still think the best show that did that was Gravity Falls. I don't know if you saw that though.
I have not.
Oh, it was a cartoon that came out, and I overlooked it until I vibed really hard with the show's creator. And then my husband was way into it, and so got me a little bit into it. But then I started watching it again after we watched it. And if we're talking about clues and hints in every episode, plus literal codexes to unsolve at the end of the credits, yeah.
Nice. I'll have to check that out then.
Only 2 seasons, and I think they're both on Hulu still.
Okay. But there's one last thing about this scene that we still haven't touched on yet, which is the source of the title of this episode, the poem Late Fragment by Raymond Carver. The short little poem. It's gorgeous. And I looked it up, and this is actually one of 2 poems that is on Raymond Carver's gravestone.
Wow.
So this is basically how he wanted to be remembered for this poem. I thought it summed up their relationship so well.
It is absolutely beautiful. And the line about being beloved and to be beloved on this earth, I think it's a message that can resonate with everybody if you have a heart.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful like shared dialogue that they do, because that poem is in the form of a dialogue between 2 lovers.
Perhaps. I think there's a lot of ways that you could interpret it. It could be between two lovers. It could be between somebody recently dead and their creator, was one way I looked at it. There's many possible interpretations you could give to it. And that's one of the great things about poetry. Usually it's done in such a concise manner that it opens itself up to multiple interpretations.
And that's why it resonates with so many people, because you're allowed to see what you want and take what you want from interpretation, so that it validates or affirms or even rejuvenates or heals things about yourself.
Yeah. But I think that's enough on that for now, although we'll come back to it later, of course, as the show cuts over to present day with Vara/Priscilla listening to a church choir perform the song Deep River.
Did you happen to find anything on Deep River?
Deep River is a song of hope and longing, expressing a desire for peace and freedom both in the present and in the afterlife. Through these melodies, slaves held on to the hope of survival. So it's an old spiritual born from the plantation era. So while she's listening to this performance, we get our full confirmation of Skrull Rhodey, or Scrody.
I don't know if I'd say it that way. I was just thinking about that. I'm like, I don't know if I'd say it that way.
You don't like Scrody? What is he? Frody? Fake Rhodey?
He's definitely not Rhodey. He's just a Skrull.
Let's call him Frodo.
Oh boy. Oh geez. Roll. Rhodey, Skrull, roll.
Okay.
Doesn't work
roll.
as well. Scrody is just funnier.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love his kind of arrogance, his absolute confidence in this scene when he's talking to Priscilla. You know, at first she's like, "Hey, Fury got fired," and he says, "Oh, really? How did that happen?" "Oh, yeah, that was me."
No, I'm sorry. I DDT'd that dude from the top rope. Which is then like, okay, so he really does have Rhodey's memories and mannerisms, because Rhodey is the one who's making some pop culture references in other franchise installments.
Yeah, you can definitely see this is the same guy, or at least has some of the same influences as the guy who's like, "Boom! Was that the tank you were looking for?"
Absolutely. But I mean, he has to be that to be such a close confidant to the president.
Oh, yeah. To be in that kind of position, you cannot be the kind of person who's like, "Well, we could do things this way, or maybe we want to do things that way. There are just so many ways that..." No, you have to be ready with, "This is how it's done. This is what we need to do next. This is what I say we should do."
Yep.
And that's who Rhodey has always been, and even Frody here has that same attitude.
It's very cool to see the actor get an opportunity to play a sinister person.
Yeah.
With the same mannerisms. Like, you know what you were like good. Now we know what you're like dark.
And really dark, because he basically tells her, "You or Fury, one of them needs to die. I don't care which one."
Yeah. But the way that he does it is just so nonchalant, to the point. I'll make it easy for you. One of the two occupants of that lovely country manor of yours is catching a bullet today. And you're just like, you could
flip a coin for all I care. Exactly.
Right. But she's also making an appeal here.
Yeah. And I think Fury can hear that as he's listening in.
Yeah, I was under the impression in the beginning of this scene that they had planned this together and that he was just listening in, but then later on find out, nope, he definitely was going solo on that.
Yeah, no, I saw that as as definitely him on his own in that scene. You can tell from the way he looks that he's just like, yeah, I had a feeling that I had been betrayed, but now I know it for sure.
They do make a major point again of pointing out how old and weak and frail and incompetent
Yeah, and
Fury
I
is.
don't think he's as bad as they think he is, but I do think he's still not the same person he was before the blip.
I am inclined to agree with that. It hit me again. I'm like, man, they're making such a hard point to be like, this Fury is weak. And I'm like, yeah, no, this Fury is not as weak as you think he is. And I think he's just taking advantage of the fact that he may have been out of the loop for a while. So he's sort of weaponizing incompetence here.
Mm-hmm. But there's only so far you can do that. The fact that so many people died in Moscow, and if he was truly as competent as he was in, say, Avengers or Winter Soldier, then you would think that he could have stopped that.
Which is interesting because that the lack of preparation for Moscow is juxtaposed against what happens later in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get there when we get there.
But in the meantime, we've got to check in with all of our main characters in the show, even the main antagonist, because we get Pagan and Gravik getting ready for some sort of attack. And Pagan is like, "Hey, Gaia's not here. Something's wrong. What's going on?" And Gravik is just like, choose them all. Took care of her. Don't worry about it.
But we already know.
Yeah, we already know. Maybe you should still worry. She is still out there. And the final line here of make it big and loud just like the Russians would. So we know this is another attempt to pit the Americans and the Russians against each other.
Yep. And it's a very exciting sequence.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely get to that. But like I said, we have to check in with everyone. And so after that brief Gravik scene, now we go back to Talos and Gaia. And man, Talos is so, Gaia calls it out. He is delusional. He is so optimistic with his plan of, look, we'll take down the insurgency, we'll keep doing the right thing, then we'll go to the president and we have this big bargaining chip of, oh, we just saved your ass. And it's like, no, you need to use the bargaining chip beforehand.
Well, and it's unfortunate that that's the world that you live in.
Oh, yeah, that's not the world I want to live in, but I recognize the world we do live in.
Yeah.
He says as much when Gaia asks if he wants to live in his own skin. And he's like, "Yes, of course I do, but we have to acknowledge the world we live in." And then he gives this completely delusional plan that ignores the world they live in.
Yeah. It's a very, you can contrast that again against Fury's words in Winter Soldier, where he talks about, S.H.I.E.L.D. takes the world as it is, not how we'd like it to be.
Right.
And he is over here very much talking about how he'd like the world to be, but his little plan has so many dependencies that have to go off just right in order for Skrulls to find a way there. It has, what he really should have said is like, we'll just go to New Asgard and ask for asylum. That would have been great, because then they could get representation through Valkyrie, and there's already precedent for aliens living on Earth at that point.
That's true, but the population of New Asgard versus the million Skrulls is a lot harder of an ask. Except for the fact that they've already been living on the Earth for however many years.
They have, and half of them got blipped back.
One would assume,
That's assuming that they didn't get blipped back into space where the ship was when they died.
No.
Ooh.
The writers slash directors have said that Bruce Banner, when he made his snap, had the forethought to be like, okay, anybody who was in a plane,
Yep.
put them somewhere safe.
But you're right. This is not, I don't know, this is not the Talos that I was accustomed to. Like, I was very suspicious here because he sounds way too optimistic for just what I was expecting from this scene.
Mm-hmm.
But he also could have just stood up and said, like, future of our people should not depend just on me. I need a council. I need wise people around me, people who are wiser than me. If they're better at making the decisions, let them. That would have been a better plan than we're going to go super Boy Scout and save the world, and then the president will give us all the rainbows.
Yeah, that's good luck with that, Talos.
But it does show the divide here between Talos and Gaia, Gaia and Gravik, Talos and Gravik. They're definitely three sides of a coin.
Yeah, and I've had this theory that Gaia's death was going to radicalize Talos, but obviously this week that seems to kind of reverse that. I wonder if Talos's death is going to change Gaia in one direction or another.
Good. I'm definitely expecting Gaia to be part of a showdown in episode 6.
Oh, I would not be at all surprised if we get Super Skrull versus Super Skrull here.
But if Gravik's the one who killed Talos, that could make Talos a martyr, and Gaia would be carrying the torch from there.
Mm-hmm. I would not be surprised if she ends up, assuming that things end on somewhat of a high note and that it's not a sad Empire Strikes Back type ending, that Gaia ends up the new leader of the Skrulls and is their empress or something along those lines. But for now, she and Talos are irreconcilable and she walks away.
I love how this scene is bookended by a distant scene of them both sitting on the bench. And then the last scene is Talos alone standing. It gives a very nice, like, this is the scene, and a very like an emotional depth that words are less capable of conveying.
And I think overall this episode was very well directed. I liked the choices that they were making on where to place the camera and all that sort of thing to help tell the story.
Yeah, there were definitely some very creative and well-intentioned scenes in the design, in the shooting design.
Including this next scene where Vara comes home.
I like to call this scene Chekhov's mask.
You thought those masks had to come back in some way?
Oh, I knew they would. I was like, that's way too prominent. I was just over analyzing, like, two of them are sort of just neutral. One of them has a slight smile and one of them has a maniacal smile. And
well, my assumption is that they were some sort of like Greek pantheon or something like that. They had that look to them.
They very well could be,
but it's we never find out. I mean, it's never called out in the dialogue at all. But yes, they are very important to the end of the scene. Yeah, they sit down together, and at first Priscilla is like, normal day, and then Fury just calls her out. She is his greatest mistake. That is painful because you know she still loves him from the dialogue before with Rhodey. You know, you can tell that there's still feelings there, but Fury's just like, I was an idiot to let my guard down and to become your husband. But he still loves her, and even knowing where it ends up, he's like, I don't think I'd do anything different.
Yeah.
I just love the scene so much.
It was a very beautiful scene, and it reminded me of, like, when we found out that he had been married this whole time. And I was like, that's a weakness. That's a compromise that he made for himself. And being the man that he was, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., it weighs so heavily on the heart to see him in this spot with the person that he compromised for.
Yeah. And I love how he pulls his gun out, puts it down on the table. She pulls out her gun, puts it down on the table. We're going to talk this out. We know what's at stake here. We're literally putting it on the table that it's a life or death situation. But let's talk first. And we get the story of how Vara became Priscilla. It's very much the kind of story that we've been assuming has been the case for a lot of Skrulls, in that they found someone who was dying, about to die, had just died, and took over their life. But the performance here, even though I kind of had that story in my head already, the way she tells it just gives it so much more pathos and meaning.
She's a very qualified actress for this role.
Yeah.
When Fury sits down and says that she's the greatest mistake, her lip
face,
quiver,
yeah,
she's just crestfallen. And I am wildly immersed in this interaction between the two of them that is both sprinkled with a little bit of banter, a little bit of threat, but it is wholly saturated in this emotional weight that is absolutely captivating.
And I just looked up the actress, Charlene Woodard, and I'm surprised that I didn't realize this until just looking it up now, but I've seen her before in one of my favorite movies of all time, one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. She, not only is she Samuel L. Jackson's wife in this movie, she's Samuel L. Jackson's mother in Unbreakable.
What? What?
She is Elijah's mother in Unbreakable and in Glass.
Wow. Oh my goodness gracious. This is super cool. Wow. She was an Eye for an Eye. That's an old movie that I saw that's absolutely gut wrenching.
I haven't seen that.
Content advisory, probably not great for the podcast.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Yeah, she's been in a bunch of stuff. She's got 65 credits to her name in IMDb, and she's been all over the place, from episodes of ER and A Different World, and way back all the way to Taxi and Hair.
Wow.
The movie version of Hair. So
incredible.
Yeah. Wonderful career, and just a great actress in this and everything else I've seen her in. And we get the 3 promises that she gave to the original Priscilla before she died. And she's only broken 1.
Has she?
I would say so. I mean, the first one, bury Priscilla at sea, she did. 2, continue to be a daughter to her parents, which Fury points out she's also done. And 3, never hurt Nick. And I have to say, Nick is hurt.
But did Nick hurt himself?
Only by listening in on the conversation that he just heard. I mean, the fact that she didn't immediately say, no, I'm not going to do this. You're going to have to kill me. See you later. Obviously, she had some sort of decision to make when she was given that ultimatum. And the fact that she even had to think about that decision is going to be painful to Nick. So yes, she hurt Nick. And she apologizes for it at that very moment. She says, sorry, darling.
Yeah.
So she knows. She knows she's broken that promise.
I think another thing that really draws me in is the level of vulnerability of the characters. Mortality is hanging over the throat of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, any second now, anybody could be a Skrull and just poof, you're dead. And she is really grappling with this task of killing Fury. And even if Fury listened in on it, does she make up for it by what happens? Nah, well, we haven't really gotten to the poem reading, but
Well,
what happens after that?
yeah.
Right after that.
Yeah. We get the echo of the poem here. And they look at each other, and I think in that recitation, looking in each other's eyes as they repeat those lines, I think they both realize at the moment, I still love this person and I can't kill them. But I have to give them the opportunity. I have to see if this is as real as I feel it is. And so that's why they both pick up the gun. They both point and shoot, but neither of them actually aims at their target.
That's curious. She's a lefty.
Didn't notice that, which is funny because I usually notice left-handers in film and TV because I am a fellow lefty.
Hey, Southpaw here too. But they both pick up their gun on the same side of the camera.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
Fury aims and she aims, and she hits the wall to his right, and he hits the wall to her left, taking out that mask.
Yep. And she takes out a bit of bookcase.
Yeah. But I almost feel like in the reading of that, they do what Fury's like, I don't know what we should do here. Renew our vows or get a divorce.
That was the one line this episode that I laughed out loud every single time I watched because it was so real. It was very much something that I would say in that kind of moment. It's like, well, we shot at each other, but we didn't kill each other, so yay?
It was unexpected for sure. I was expecting somebody to be dead.
Yeah.
And when it panned back to her first, I was like, no way. And then, yeah, it was a very quick payoff, but it was very nice subversion there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the cut away to the rest of the empty house for a couple of brief shots, and then to her, and then you hear his voice. And she asks, would you have loved me if I had never changed? If I had always been my true self? And Fury gives the saddest answer possible.
Guess we'll never know.
And walks out the door. Do you think we're going to see Priscilla again?
I do. Either there's going to be a closure to her arc in this story with Fury, whether they go their separate ways or not.
Okay.
And or not could mean death.
Mm-hmm.
But I also kind of feel like there's room for Gravik to masquerade as her.
Okay.
To get close to him, just like he masqueraded as Fury to get close to Maria. So the actress may be back. The character, I definitely feel like there's going to be a bookend.
I could see a brief bookend after the main action is over, but I don't think that Priscilla is going to actively be a part of the plot anymore, is my feeling on it. That felt like a very final scene between the two of them.
Could be. And given what we know of the trailer of Captain Marvel, pretty positive Fury doesn't stick around either way.
Yeah, of course, we're assuming that Captain Marvel takes place after Secret Invasion, or the Marvels takes place after Secret Invasion, but
it's so close to each other in timeline stuff. It's early November 2026, and then it premieres November 10th. So I'm hanging on a prayer.
No, I think it makes total sense, but they've moved things around enough times that it's still a possibility. I'd love to see an editor's note in the opening scene of the Marvels that just says, asterisk, this takes place before Secret Invasion.
Like they do in the comics. It's so good.
Yeah. And something that surprised me a little bit, although it's not a big deal, but it was still an interesting choice, I thought, is that we see Skrull Rhodey showering, and is it just me, or is Rhodey Skrull's natural form female?
I'm sensing a definite femininity there, 100%, a million percent. The towel is hiked up over the chest, the contours of the face,
Yeah.
the eyelashes. I thought it was Gaia before it turned into Rhodey. So
yeah, I had that thought as well, that it might be Gaia after her scene with Talos. But no, that's who Rhodey is in their natural form.
cool.
Yeah, like I said, it doesn't seem to be vital to the plot when I say it's not important, but I found it interesting that this is the first time that a Skrull's natural form and their standard human identity has been different genders.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if that happened in Captain Marvel. I think the woman on the train that Danvers beats up
Yeah,
was.
but again,
was
I
a
wouldn't
male
call
Skrull,
that
but-
her. I wouldn't call that a standard.
Yeah.
Their
You're right.
constant
You're right.
identity, because we saw that woman walking past Carol on her way to the train, so
Yeah.
they had just taken up that disguise right then. Interesting choice. I don't want to get too far into gender politics here, other than to say that trans men are men and trans women are women, and the fact that is the case, and that we can have that not be the butt of a joke
Yeah.
or something along those lines is a nice change of pace and a good step.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And we take it to our next scene of political chess.
Yes, because Fury has broken in to Rhodey's place, bringing a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle, 23-year-old bourbon.
So made right around the time Spider-Man was born.
Oh, that hurt. I feel old.
Oh.
But Fury accurately refers to this as a $5,000 bottle, because I looked it up. While if you're lucky enough to get it retail straight from the bottler when it first gets released, it's only $300 only. If you look on eBay or resellers or anything like that, you will find it goes for anywhere from 3 to 6, but right around 5,000 looks to be the standard price for a bottle of Pappy 23.
Yeah. They even make a bottle of Pappy maple syrup that's 23 years aged.
Wow.
Bourbon barrel aged maple syrup, and it's $48.
New.
Uh-huh.
Which means it probably ends up going on the secondary market for like $400, $500 or more.
Yeah, my maple syrup scalpers.
And what I think is fun in this scene is how Nick is being absolutely honest with Rhodey in the scene. You know, Rhodey's like, do I have to worry about poison? No, nanotechs.
He's so honest about it, though.
And the next thing he does is, hey, there are Skrulls in the U.S. government, someone very close to the president. I have it on good authority.
As close as you are to me
right now. So the whole time here, Fury is being absolutely honest with them, but he knows that this is a Skrull, and he knows, you know, this is a scene where definitely he is playing up his incompetence.
Do you think Frody thinks that Nick killed Priscilla here?
That's a good question.
Because when Rhodey comes in the door, I actually visibly watch him like he's shook to see someone sitting there. But is he shook because it's Fury, and is that the shaking recognition that Fury killed his wife? Just something to think about.
Yeah, I could definitely go either way. I could totally see him thinking, oh, I guess Fury's the one who made it out of that pairing. But it also could be in his mind that Fury and Priscilla haven't seen each other yet since the scene in the church, because Priscilla was surprised that Fury was home.
Yeah.
So it's not like she went to immediately seek him out. She just happened to arrive upon him. So Rhodey could think, oh, well, I guess I guess that confrontation hasn't happened yet.
Maybe.
Because you would think that from Frody's perspective, if Priscilla had tried to kill Nick and Nick had killed her instead, and you think Nick is a broken shell of a man, then you would not think that he would come to you with Skrulls are in the US government. He would come to you and be like, my wife was a Skrull, I had to kill her. You know, you would think that that this would weigh on him more and that he would be even more broken than he was.
And
again,
that's
this is from Frody's point of view.
Maybe, but that's where the double speak-ish has to be. Like, Frody knows that he sent Priscilla to kill Fury.
Mm-hmm.
Rhodey then sees Fury. If Frody is expecting Fury to be post encounter with Priscilla, then he might expect, as you say, Fury to be distraught about the situation. But the fact that he is going off on what Frody is trying to gaslight into conspiracy theories, that may twist the situation to mean that Priscilla hasn't had a time to meet up with him yet.
Yeah.
In either case, Fury threatens to go public with this information.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that the only thing he asks for in this scene is for his job back. Again, I think that's him playing up his incompetence, but I still found it an interesting choice.
Well, we do know that the whole purpose of this encounter here is for Fury to bug Rhodey.
Right, true.
And that whole context of this discussion is, I'm trying to get out of here alive, so I'm going to be crazy.
Yeah, that makes sense. But Frody has his own plan here.
Yep.
He pulls out the footage of Fury shooting Maria. It's like, I don't think you'll be getting your job back. Why don't you hobble your ancient ass out of here before I have you defenestrated? Which is one of my favorite big words. The fact that we have a word for throwing somebody out of a window.
Yep. Defenestrate is one of the all-time greats.
And again, Don Cheadle is having so much fun.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is.
If he had a mustache, he would be twirling it right now.
I'm curious why Frody isn't straight up killing Nick here. He wants him dead. He obviously has the power to do so. So why doesn't he just kill Nick and leave him in the hotel room to go on to the next scene unencumbered? We do know, I guess we see later, that Talos was with Nick the whole time. So if Nick didn't come out, Talos would probably charge up there.
Yeah.
But it is just interesting seeing, and maybe Frody figured that out. Maybe Frody's like, if Fury's here, there's backup somewhere. I can't do this here.
Right. Yeah. It could be a matter of location. And the fact that if a fight breaks out, we've seen that Frody is always surrounded by Secret Service or some other sort of bodyguards or, something to that effect. So if a fight broke out and it lasted more than a couple of seconds, then there would be other people in the room to witness either Rhodey going Skrull or something that could possibly give away the fact that Rhodey is not who he claims to be. So I think it's probably just a smart tactical move. Again, I think his assumption at this point is that Priscilla and Nick have not met back up yet since the conversation in the church. And so he's just like, hey, let him go home and meet his lovely wife who's about to kill him anyways. That way I don't have to try to explain away a body in my hotel room.
Yeah, that's probably the best rationale for the situation. There's a time and place for it, and maybe also Frody has like standing orders. Gravik wants the kill.
Except that he sent Priscilla to do it.
That's fair.
So Gravik doesn't seem to want to do it personally in this case.
Gravik has bigger designs in play.
Yeah. But as we've alluded to earlier, there's nanotech or something along those lines in the Pappy, which is fire, according to Frody. I mean, for $5,000, it better be.
Oh, man. I'm like salivating. I love whiskey.
I'm not much of a drinker. My usual comment is that I pretty much quit drinking when I turned 21.
I remember you saying that in the last episode.
Yeah, lost that illicit thrill and didn't really do much for me otherwise, so... I mean, I occasionally have a glass of wine with my friends when I'm over at their house, but it's pretty rare. Anyways, speaking of that bourbon, apparently it leaves quite the breath behind.
Yep.
Ritson meeting up with Rhodey here, and basically the first thing out of Ritson's mouth is, "Hey, did you just swallow half a bottle of bourbon? What is going on with you?" That was probably the other line in here that got a laugh out of me, was that interaction there between Ritson and Rhodey. And obviously, I had originally theorized that Ritson was a Skrull, but you got it right in Rhodey being a Skrull, and Ritson is the patsy here, because he has no idea what's coming for him in just a few minutes.
We can see the secret agent who got his arm broken by Fury is in a cast now.
Yeah, it took me a minute to be like, why is that guy in a cast? Oh, right.
Fury got the drop on him and broke his arm.
Yeah, you'd think they'd get a different agent to come and replace him while he recovers, but possibly there wasn't one available in
the UK.
Yeah.
No one we can trust.
Yeah. And Frody treats his Secret Service detail like the hired help. Here.
Can I get a mint?
Get me a mint. Open my door, person with a broken arm.
Well, he's treating a human as chattel.
Very true. And once he gets in the car and they're on their way, he calls and tells Gravik which of the cars is the president's.
Citadel is in number 4.
I always love all the nicknames and everything that they give to the president and his vehicles and entourage and all of that in TV shows and movies, where they're either like Eagle or the fact that the car is referred to as Stagecoach, and here the president is Citadel. And I think that's a fun little detail, and usually kind of tells you something about the character, like what kind of president he is. He's a citadel, he's a fortress, he's defensive.
Well, and defense is badly needed in this scene as a couple of helicopters drop in and tear it up.
Yeah, and Fury and Talos immediately see the smoke and make their way across a field through some woods to get to helping out, and here is where the money went.
Yeah, this is why the episode's 38 minutes.
Because they could afford this action scene and a couple of talkie scenes, and we're done.
Yep.
And sure enough, Gravik unleashes his Groot powers. Once again, you called it on this one. I had originally thought he had just stretched out from Skrull shape-shifting abilities, but no, that is full-on Groot there.
Yep.
As he wraps that Secret Service agent in branches and crushes him.
Fun note here, Fury finally gets to bazooka a helicopter after missing Loki's getaway in Avengers 14 years prior.
Good job, Fury. 14 years late, but you got it. you got that attack.
Fighting aliens again.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that callback. Good catch there. You said there were a couple of beats that you specifically wanted to call out.
Well, the group thing definitely was
Yeah.
one of the beats. Fury with the blowing up the helicopter. The beat that really stands out to me in terms of like preparation is the sudden appearance of MPs showing up in full war gear, apparently on Fury's name, because they protect him and Talos to get to Citadel and allow the extrication of Ritson. And I was really noted in one scene where like they're covering the vehicle and one of the guys gets shot in the front and another guy just immediately steps over him to cover that gap.
Yeah.
So, Fury's ability to call in favors is not quite compromised. I'm wondering if the woman that I can't remember her name, but the other intelligence head that we've seen.
Oh, Sonya.
Yeah, Sonya provided these forces for Nick.
See, I didn't think of those as being specifically for Nick. I heard the Secret Service enough times saying call for backup that I assumed that was the backup that had been called, and they just recognized these guys are firing at the people who are trying to shoot the president, so we know they're on our side. So I didn't think of them as being specifically attached to Fury there.
See, I saw their immediate protective column for Fury and Talos as they ran to the car as something that was favoring them.
Yeah, I see that, but at the same time, I think they were just... Fury kind of took control of that scene.
He did, but he's a bad guy to these people. Like Rhodey has told the president in the first episode that Fury and Maria were off the reservoir, and so I wouldn't expect American, not American legal authorities, but American allied legal authorities to take any kind of direction from Nick Fury in regards to a presidential issue, unless somebody called them in as a favor. That's just how I see it.
Okay. I think we'll probably just agree to disagree on this one.
Okay.
Because my thoughts on that is that we saw some of that contingent at the airport when they left, as they were going through the gate. I think we could see some soldiers there, and so my assumption is that they were just those soldiers from the airport arriving. And I think in that situation, they might not have known about Fury's status, and they just saw someone who was taking charge and was obviously trying to protect the president, and they know that's their job. And so they were like, okay, let's do what this guy says. He seems to know what's going on.
Maybe. Interesting that the next person in charge there just sat in the car the whole time, chilling. Why wouldn't that person be rushing out trying to coordinate these backup forces as needed?
Gosh, I have no idea. We'll never know.
He could have gone out there and been like, Fury's a bad guy. Shoot him. He's one of the attackers.
That's true.
Would have been real quick.
Yeah.
First, they released the footage of Nick Fury going rogue to kill Maria Hill. And then they have a body that they brought back from a Russian-sponsored attack on the president that led to Nick Fury's death, but the president was apprehended. If they had been successful, that would be the messaging.
Right. I wonder if/when Frody noticed or knew that Fury was there.
I don't know. I know Pagan called it out.
Pagan calls it out. Gravik sees it, obviously, but Rhodey just stayed in the car the entire time. It was like, I'm gonna do some Sudoku here.
What we have here is a failure to communicate.
And the bit that I thought was most important is when Talos goes to break the window in, and he gets winged by that bullet at first, and his Skrullness starts showing itself.
His concentration is weakened because he's injured.
Yeah. And the fact that Fury was able to stop that one soldier from shooting him and say, no, he's on our side. He's with me.
Right. And that Talos lives up to what he said to Gaia by showing his quality and continuing to try and rescue the president wounded.
Yeah. Even though I've said over and over that Talos is being delusional or too optimistic, he does kind of prove himself here to say, if we just do the right thing, they'll treat us the right way.
We have mentioned before that Gravik and Talos are two sides of the plank over the fulcrum, and if Gravik is going to be as zealous about his initiative, Talos has to balance that out by being just as determined.
Mm-hmm.
And this really shows and we can even see here like Talos dying to save the president from a rival Skrull faction.
Yeah,
That could usher in some leeway, some leverage for the Skrull society to pull on.
He could be a martyr.
Yeah,
for the Skrull people, but we won't find that out this episode.
No, Fury drives away and leaves him on the ground.
Well, but we've skipped over the most vital moment in the soldier picking Talos up and Fury looking and being like, wait, that's not one of ours.
Yep. Does a really good job of determining that. Fury, old, decrepit, weak, not on the ball Fury spots a Skrull.
Fury, who 3 episodes earlier says, I can't always tell when when a human is actually a Skrull.
Yep. Just the little hints that are just helping me stay hopeful on my theory.
Yeah, I think you've been right more than I have throughout our various theory crafting.
We will see, of course. But yes, he calls it correctly, and we get a great confrontation there.
Oh, man. When Gravik stabs Talos, and then Fury shoots him dead on in the face. I mean, that first moment when Gravik stabs Talos, I was just like, oh man. I did not see it coming.
And it's a lethal stabbing too, because it's inside the pectoral or like lateral to the inside here. It's where you'd go to stab somebody in the heart if you wanted to go through a rib.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Talos does not have the extremis healing factor that Gravik does, and that we see right now in this scene as Gravik was shot pretty much point blank in the face.
Yeah. It's just one more way that Tony Stark has ruined the world.
Nice.
He gave the world extremis, and here it is.
Was that Tony though?
Yeah, he's the one who fixed what's her name's formula.
Okay, but it was her formula.
It was hers, but he fixed it.
She might have gotten there eventually.
Sure, she could have. But as we said in 2010, China, Russia, 5 years, Hammer Tech 10.
Yeah.
Or 20 or whatever.
Yeah.
Stark's contribution is there.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments from Batman the Animated Series was an episode called Lockup, which introduced the character of the same name. And the police kind of give Batman the lowdown on who this guy is, and Robin hears the backstory and says, another Gotham City villain brought to you by Wayne Enterprises. And Batman just gives him this look like, I can get another one of you.
Yeah. Yep. But Fury has to make a choice here. He's got Ritson in the car, and Talos is down, and Gravik has taken off on a bike with Pagan, leaving these remaining pawns to fight it out until there's a victor, I guess. Because I can't tell if they hired like a Russian hit squad and led it, or if these are actually Skrulls that are fighting that they're leaving behind.
I would assume that they are all Skrulls. Although that does leave me with one big question.
The dead bodies that remain?
That is exactly the big question. Because they want them to think it's the Russians.
Right.
But we know there's at least 2 or more Skrulls there. If any of the Skrulls are killed in that firefight and there are survivors to investigate the scene afterwards, how are they going to think it's the Russians if they see Skrull bodies?
Right.
Even though granted, the Secret Service would have called in and said, the Russians are attacking us. But once the scene is investigated at all, it would say, well, those aren't Russians.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Talos's body lying there, so we clearly have one non-state offender there.
But we should finish this up here.
Yeah, you can see the desperation in Fury's eyes. Like, do I go back for him? Do I leave him? Is he dead? I've got the president. Like, what do I do? And
Yeah.
it's very much like Rhodey leaving with the president at the end of Iron Man 3 and leaving Tony to have to deal with the rest of the Extremis goons.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Rhodey and Iron Man 3, now that we know 100% that a Skrull has taken Rhodey's place, when do you think that switch out occurred?
I want to believe so hard that when Rhodes gives his last goodbyes to Tony in Endgame, that was genuine.
Yeah.
So sometime after Endgame, his hostility towards Sam in Falcon and Winter Soldier leads me to think that it might have been before that.
That was my thought as well. Because that's really the only time we've seen Rhodey since Endgame.
Which makes me think that we're going to get a War Machine cameo in episode 6 when they free real Rhodey. And that might be what episode 5 is about, is finding the real Rhodes.
And all of the other people that the Skrulls have in fracking pods.
Yeah. You'd think that Rhodes would have been there. We just haven't seen him yet. And I hope it's in the same camp because it allows Gaia to masquerade as somebody else, maybe even Gravik, who is away for the mission.
Mm-hmm.
But someone's going to have to tell her that Talos is missing in action.
Yeah, and I think that will set her off. Because, she says in the scene with her and Talos, she says, you have to have a plan because Gravik has already implemented his, and it works. So even though she disagrees with Gravik at this point, she still acknowledges that what he's doing will work. It is a viable endgame that the Skrulls basically take over from the humans. And so finding out about her father's death is going to pit her 100% against Gravik.
Yeah.
And say, hey, you killed both my parents.
Yeah.
But before we find all that out, the next episode is the penultimate episode of the show. So we will see how they set up the ending next week of
Secret Invasion.
That wraps up our conversation. Thank you again to Dag, aka Trek Nexus on most social media, for joining me, and thank you all for listening. If you have any thoughts on this episode that you want to chime in with, or anything else you'd like to contribute, don't forget you can do so by sending an email to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome to Geektown, Twitter @GeektownPodcast, or Mastodon @welcome2geektown @mastodon.social. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, why not become a patron at patreon.com/welcome to Geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, which includes the unedited conversations for each of these deep dives, and a monthly shout-out. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them,
welcome to Geektown. Population, us.
Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All of their sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.